University, what is it? Oh my gosh, G3, right? Yes, G3, Guam Green Growth. They're here to help and assist in any way. So they'll walk around with notepads, pens, sticky tabs, and the microphone if necessary for anyone who wants to speak. And although there are thousands and thousands of great fishing stories to share, we ask that you stay on topic because we're only here for a limited period of time, really 2 hours. And that's it. And there's a lot to discuss, there's a lot to share, and we'll quickly run out of time, but we want to respect everybody's time. We have to get home to our families. I live in Talafofo, but I have to drive back down to Inalåhan to pick up my kids to bring him back home. So that's a lot of driving, and we all have to do the same. Keep your comments clear and concise as much as possible, just so that we can ensure we understand you when you're trying to communicate, and we can have an answer back that you can understand as well. And focus on solutions. We all know that there are problems. We've all seen it. That's why we're here today. It's because we all know what the problems are. What we're trying to find together is solutions so that we can help everybody and ensure sustainability for all of us. And although we're in a public space, to some extent, there's confidentiality. Any comments that you offer, because there is someone recording all of this, and any comments that you offer will not be directly attributed to an individual. So we won't be saying, hey, Robert Koss said this at the meeting and this is what we're gonna put into the plan. It'll just be a fisher who was present at this community meeting shared this perspective. So no one's names will be put out there for anybody. And in the end, what we really want to express and ask is to remember who we're doing this for. Yes, for us to some extent, but we've all lived our lives and had our opportunities. I'm not a fisher, but I'm an avid eater of fish. I once said I'm a commercial eater of fish. So I love the fishing community with my whole heart, absolutely, because you guys feed me. It's the best thing on Guam, is someone who feeds you. But we're here for our children and the community and all the generations to come after. We want to ensure that we are sustainably harvesting our fish so that we can make sure that there's fish to feed our families. We all experienced what happened with COVID, and then there was a second, There was a second strike with the ports, and there was no food. Everyone was worried about running out of food, running out of toilet paper. But on Guam, we have our own little security nets. We have agriculture and fishing. So in some sense, we're our own zombie apocalypse-free zone. We can feed ourselves if we manage our resources properly and sustainably. So it's all for our kids, it's for our families, that's why we're here. And again, I want to emphasize, no one at DAR, no one at the Department of Agriculture is trying to take fishing away. It's the last thing we want to do. We have fishers across our team in different divisions, actually, not even just DAR. And we want to ensure that we protect fishing for Guam's fishing community. So no one is trying to restrict your rights. We just want to ensure that we all participate together and have a conversation, come to some reasonable compromise that can ensure we have fisheries for our future and for our dinner tables. And sometimes it may be tightening the belt a little bit in the short term, or it may not, depending on what options are selected. But it's all for the long-term benefit of our island and our youth and our families. So with that, I would like to pass this microphone to Leilani, who will walk you through some other components. It's for Farron. For the Guam guy.
Hafiday, everyone. Mega Ma'asi for being here. Guahusi Leilani Sablan. I'm a fisherwoman. I'm also a biologist with the University of Guam. Just to echo what Chelsea was mentioning earlier, thank you to Inalåhan for the hospitality. Mayor Chargilaf, really appreciate it. And I also want to recognize Mayor Champaco from Malesu. Thank you for being here. Again, give them a round of applause. Again, University of Guam helping the Department of Agriculture with facilitating this fisheries management plan. which has been years in the making, and you will hear from some DAR technicians on that process and the input that was received from the fishing community that's guiding this fisheries management plan. And I think everyone in the room can recognize that our reefs have been negatively impacted by a number of reasons, including climate change, erosion leading to sedimentation, land-based pollution, and fishing pressure. So yes, there are a number of issues that are resulting in some type of decline that we've been seeing over the past 2 decades. Some of these are beyond DAR's jurisdiction, like land-based pollution, that's kind of an EPA thing. They are addressing erosion and sedimentation by planting thousands and thousands of trees with their forestry division. But if there's one thing that the Division of Aquatic and Wildlife Resources can address, it's the unsustainable fishing practices that might be occurring in our island. I think we do have to acknowledge, right, to some extent that there are unsustainable fishing practices being done on our island. May not be us in the room, but we know that it happens, and we know that it's contributing to the decline to some extent. So if there's one thing that DAR can do as part of this plan is kind of recognize that that's happening in our waters and create some type of plan that addresses the unsustainable forms of fishing while leaving, obviously, sustainable fishing to our people. Let's see if this works. Okay, cool. And fishing pressure is not a unique issue to our island. Fishing pressure is kind of experienced throughout the world, throughout the Pacific, and throughout Micronesia. And so our brothers and sisters in the other islands have taken action in response to the fishing pressure that they've been experiencing over the years. And they have fisheries management plans as well. Guam is simply catching up, and some of the proposed measures that you're going to see today are not just a reflection of input from the fishing community, but they're also kind of reflections on what other islands are doing. We're learning from them on things that have been working to address fishing pressure in their islands. So a few examples of some things that are being done elsewhere are some types of restrictions on nighttime spearfishing, for example, size limits on key species, often at least 12 to 15 different size limit species, for example. Some islands even ban the harvesting of rare species like tangisin and atuhong. They're not just rare here, but they are slow-growing species that take a long time to mature, and so they've put a stop on harvesting species like that. What else do we have? Some islands have over 15 marine preserve areas, some of which are co-managed by traditional groups. So again, lots that we can learn from our brothers and sisters elsewhere. I've had the amazing opportunity to dive many of these places. Yeah, Palau, Pohnpei, and it's like living in a National Geographic documentary. It's just like schools of atuhong swimming right in front of you, schools of trevally, parrotfish spawning, changing color. It's the most amazing thing. It's one of those moments where you wish you could grow gills and just stay underwater forever. But again, DAR is not trying to reinvent the wheel here when you see these proposed measures. And again, nothing's final, as Chelsea mentioned. DAR is really trying to have a conversation with you, the fishing community, before anything gets fleshed out as part of this plan. But again, it's a translation of what we're seeing from the fishing community and learning from our brothers and sisters from elsewhere. Oh yeah, and we could implement all of the measures tomorrow and we'd actually still be one of the least managed islands in Micronesia. So we've got a lot of catching up to do. Okay, cool. So many of you are probably wondering what the science and what the data backing up this fisheries management plan looks like. So as part of this FMP process, the University of Guam was invited by DOAG DAR to assist in creating what we call population assessments of many of the species that we enjoy eating on a day-to-day basis. So 28 different species of fish were examined. These comprise at least 60% of the landings. So as you know, we're a multi-species fishery. There's hundreds of fish species that we harvest out there. So what DAR did with the report was just looked at the top species that we enjoy eating. So about 60, they comprise at least 60% of the landings. And what this assessment did was it pulled from a number of data sets. So it looked at fisheries independent data. So that's data collected by scientists, usually counting fish underwater. And it also pulled from fisheries dependent data. That's catch data collected directly from the fishing community. And so it used a consensus approach where it didn't just examine 1 or 2 data sets, it examined at least 9. And that's pretty awesome for a small Pacific island like ours. Not many other islands have that many data sets, so that's pretty awesome. And so what that assessment did again was kind of looked at the populations for these top 28 species and determined whether they were decreasing, increasing, or remaining relatively stable over time. If you would like to download and read that report, there is a QR code up there that you can scan with your phone and download it. It can be a bit sciencey, so if you do have any questions, we do have some data experts in the room. I'm going to call out Dr. Brett Taylor in the back and Dr. Peter Hauk, who will be here. So if you have any questions about that, they're more than welcome to take your questions. But long story short, with this report, the assessments essentially showed that at least half, more than 63% of top species caught showed declining biomass, meaning their populations were decreasing in abundance and or decreasing in size over time. So some of these species that were declining in biomass and or size made prime candidates for species-specific regulations. So you're seeing the list of proposed species for the first time, and these are the bluefin tadikitu, the tataga, amber lagua, the mactanhagen, the filament fin lagua, the long-nosed parrotfish, which we call golafi, a tan-faced lagua, steep-head lagua, lagodisu, tangisin, and a tuhong. So the two on the right didn't have too much data. They're kind of rare in the data sets. That kind of hints at how they're kind of far and few along the reef. And many of these were experiencing decline over time. So that's just 10 out of the many, many species. I can't obviously fit all the species that we love to eat on one slide, but these are some of my favorites, so I put them up there. But that's just 10 out of many that we enjoy eating on a day-to-day basis. So DAR is kind of starting small with this list of 10. I mentioned earlier that some islands have species-specific regulations for at least 12 to 15 different species, and DAR is again, wanting to have this conversation. They're flexible with this list, it seems. They want to hear from you. Is there something on that list that maybe that's not sitting well? What can we maybe add or remove? So again, as Chelsea mentioned, nothing's final. They're really trying to do a bottom-up approach and listen to your input. So that's why we're all here today, and we'll have, if we have time for the second one activity, we'll do that, but we'll have at least one activity where every single person in the room can give their individual feedback on whether they support or do not support some of the measures and species. Okay, so a big question that kind of comes up too is our MPA data. We're pretty much here today because we're here because our MPAs alone have not been able to reverse the decline. You dive beyond an MPA, and our non-MPAs are still taking a hit. They're generally doing a lot worse than our MPAs. Yes, there are some MPAs that don't do as well. The ones that are more enforced, high visibility, frequently visited, right, do better, like PD Bomb Holes and Tumon Bay. But our non-MPA sites are taking a hit. As we know, we don't have any regulations right now beyond MPAs and the ban on scuba spear. So anyone can go at this moment and catch any species, any fish at any size and at any quantity. And you could do that all day, every day if you wanted to. So you can do that outside of a non-MPA, and you can see how that kind of contributes to some type of decline. We do know some exceptions, right? The windward side of Guam, Mother Nature, we're on the windward side now. We do know that Mother Nature kind of does its own thing in protecting the windward reefs for a good portion of the year. And what do we see during these times of the year is typically less fishing. And so I know, at least for myself, I love to fish the east side of the island when it gets calm, which is like right around now, maybe not today, but last week was a good window. We fishers know to hit the east side when it gets calm because the fishing is generally better there. Because for half the year, fishing pressure is kind of alleviated. There's not a lot of, it's dangerous to fish on the windward side, right? There's lots of surf, the weather's not good. And so the fish are able to reproduce and grow. And so when it gets calm, it's kind of like you hit that as soon as it gets calm. So again, yeah, there are some exceptions to windward sites. Generally, not all of them, but some of them, especially if they're further away from fishing access, do better than even some MPAs, poorly enforced NVAs, and better than some leeward sites. There are two websites that I wanted to introduce to all of you. If you wanted to explore one out of many data sets, about the MPAs and for non-MPAs. This is collected by the Micronesia Coral Reef Monitoring Program, and they put together 2 awesome websites. You can take a photo of that if you want to log in and explore it later, but this is the first one. The second one, which I personally like a lot better, it's a bit more interactive and it tells more of a story about each site that you click on. So as you can see, it comprises MPAs and it also comprises any available data for non-MPAs. Again, this is just one data set, but the general story that this data set is telling is kind of similar to what other data sets are saying as well. So I've clicked on PD bomb holes here. I can see the average fish size during those observations, those surveys, the common fish that were seen during those surveys. I could compare the fish biomass in that site compared to others. I've clicked Pago Bay here, and you can see similar data. I like this one better because it also shows, it's a bit more sciencey, which I like. There's a lot more visuals and graphs, but it also tells a story at the way top. So it kind of gives you a summary of how that site is doing relative to other sites. So that login and password for that website is available if anyone wants to take a photo now, or you can see me after if you'd like to explore that further. And Dr. Peter Hauk, I'm going to call him out again. He's probably going to be here, but he helped to develop this website. He's worked not only in Guam, but also throughout Micronesia in gathering data for this website. But do we really need the data and the science to kind of tell us what's been going on with our reefs over the past 2 decades? I think beyond the science, beyond the data, there's something more powerful, at least in my opinion, that tells a story about our reefs, and it's your generations of observations and stories that tell us that many areas that were once abundant with fish are now struggling to recover. I learned how to spearfish 6 years ago, and it has not been easy. I'm not like an amazing diver by any means, but it can be hard for a day-to-day fisher like me to even catch fish nowadays. But I've heard stories from many of you that I've had the awesome privilege to know and work with from my elders about what fishing used to be like. People are having to go further away now, spend more money on gas, or find a spot, or it's just been generally harder. And to me, your stories, your observations are powerful. They're more powerful to me, in my opinion, than the science. And so this fisheries management plan, I believe, is not just a response to what the science is saying. It's really a response to the concerns from the fishing community that have been repeated year by year. What are we doing about unsustainable fishing that's occurring in Guam? And so as you'll see in just a moment, this FMP is a reflection of your feedback, your input, weaves together the science and tries to find some sort of compromise where we can benefit not just the reefs, but also our people. So how do we contribute in a way that benefits our reefs and benefits our people? So now I will pass the mic over to Robert Kass. Take it away.
Thank you, Leilani. Hi guys, thank you all for being here tonight. Very important night here, and I appreciate that. So I'm going to
The Guam guys.
gotta put on a shirt, Mike. I'm going to tell you a little about the origin of the FMP, and I come from a FMP subgroup. It's the community subgroup. I was tasked with reaching out to the community along with Mr. Mike Duenas and Mr. Jamie Bass, because we are all fishermen and we have reach with fishermen. So the proposed measures that we are presenting today are a result of weaving together science data with fisher input. So a lot of the regulation proposals that you guys are gonna see is coming from the fishers. We've done this before, we've been here before. We've been to the north before, been to the central, and been to the south multiple times. And all of the regulations you're about to see are proposed by fishers themselves, okay? So a little bit about the history. It's been a work in progress since 2020. That was the inception. And we listed down all our meetings here, and a lot of familiar faces were attending those meetings and providing input. And it leads us to where we are here today. If you look at the center, that's one of our stakeholder meetings and the industry meetings that we had. We have Guam Hotel Restaurant Association up there, along with fishermen, alongside, working together to create solid input and create this solid fisheries plan that we can find a happy medium for. So some of the meetings we've had, all these fishermen have good input, and they were concerned about quite a few things. A lot of things they were concerned about were large piles of very small fish. Some villages are affected more than others, and a lot of these people from these villages, they didn't like seeing that. They didn't like the catching of undersized fish in masses. So they recommended that we put bag limits on it. They recommended that we put size limits. They wanted mandatory catch reporting so we can make these informed decisions for our management plan. They wanted to require fishers to get licensed for commercial fishermen or fish vendors. So the nice thing about licensing for fish vendors is we get to track what they're buying. So if we have a size limit on fish, then the fish vendors won't buy these small fish anymore, and then people will stop. The idea is fishers will stop targeting them. They didn't like the overexploitation within nighttime spearfishing hours. They were saying they had to increase their fishing effort or maybe go further and still catch less, or they were concerned about their catch and how hard they worked for it. And among many other good concerns and good solid input, our styles of these meetings were open forum. So we just had a room like this full of people, and everyone was able to talk and share their concerns, and we listened. And this is with science and the fishers' input, we came together and we came up with what you see today. We've also done a lot of social media reaching. We've done surveys like what you see here. This is the types of measures that people would support. So a lot of them were for the size limits. A lot of them were for commercial versus recreational licensing. And keep in mind, the licensing for recreational fishers, it could even be free. They were for marine protected areas. They wanted temporary ban on vulnerable species like the atuhung. They wanted bag limits. The next masses wanted marine managed areas, temporary bans on certain gear types, and tighter restrictions on gear types. For this one, the fishers were asked if commercial and subsistence fishing should be regulated equally or differently. And a lot of them, most of them said regulate both sectors, but have stricter regulations for commercial fishers than recreational fishers. The next mass said regulate only the commercial sector, and the next mass said that they wanted to regulate both sectors and make it the same. And then a lot of them didn't have an opinion. So please remember, before I pass the mic on to Mr. Andrew Kang, take it easy on him. This is all input from fishers. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Kang. I'm a fisheries biologist at the Department of Agriculture. So I'm going to continue the presentation by discussing with you guys, or presenting to you guys the measures we drafted and are proposing to the southern fishing community today. So based on the interaction with fishermen in the community, and as you saw, the chart showed what everyone was in support of and what everyone was against, if there were any. The first measure we wanted to propose to you guys is a minimum size limit for 9 species. And we chose these 9 species based on the data, and one of them was the NOAA Coral Reef Fish Stock Assessment. And this data was drawn from sampling efforts and visual studies based on Guam populations of fish and not other areas like Hawaii or anything. The second proposed measure we're bringing to the table is no harvesting of a tuhum. And we wanted to pitch this to you guys because they're not very frequent on our reef ecosystem. And they're also missing in our data collection. And so currently the MPA was put into effect to try and protect species like these, but since there's been no increased visual sighting in the natural reef, we're trying to implement a protective measure now so that when they do rebound, we'll have something in place to protect this vital species. The third drafted measure we're proposing today is the mandatory licensing and catch reporting. Although we've put a lot of time and effort into gaining a good picture or a good sense of what our fishing community is like, who is in this fishing community, what are they catching, we still have room for improvement. So we're hoping that by drafting this measure, we can gain a more complete picture of what's going on in our fishing community on Guam. The fourth measure is a ban on commercial sales for 6 species. To us, cultural practice of fishing is very important. And also sustainable fishing is also very important. And we also have in mind the subsistence fishers. So we don't want to put a total ban, but we just want to put a commercial ban for the 6 species of wrasse and parrotfish. And that's because if there's a high demand in the market for them, then people are going to be targeting them for the wrong reasons. So we want to sort of limit that kind of fishing pressure and behavior. Next slide, please. So the last proposed measure for this FMP is how are we going to regulate the nighttime spearfishing sector? And based on the input from the fishing community, we are proposing a couple different pathways of how to regulate the nighttime spearfishing. The least stringent is to prohibit commercial nighttime spearing only, but subject subsistence fishers to a permit and a daily limit so that they can continue to provide food for the family or practice the culture of fishing. Kind of like a medium approach is a seasonal moratorium on nighttime spear fishing. So what that means is we'd open up the fisheries at night to all the fishing community for a certain number of months out of the year, and then the other months out of the year, we'd close it down so that we can allow the population to, grow back or bounce back, or just have more individuals in the local population. And then the most stringent or the most harsh regulation for the nighttime spearfishing would be to just completely ban nighttime spearfishing across all the sectors of fishing, and so nobody would be allowed to go spear for fish at night. And then we'll see how this works out by collecting the data and analyzing it, and then hopefully we can come back to the table in a couple years or so and discuss with you guys and share with you guys the data, and then see what we feel about it, and are we gonna keep it the same or adapt to the situation or find a better solution, things like that. And so I'll be back later to go more in depth, but I'm gonna hand off the mic to Lonnie.
Okay, you probably have a lot of questions already. I invite you to write them down. And if you need pen and paper, our G3CC can come around and give you pen and paper. We're gonna try to get through all the detailed explanations of every single measure and then have a questionnaire period. But at this time, I would like to invite everybody in the room to we really do need to think about how these measures are going to affect us at an individual level, at community level. Because the way that I see it is this management plan is really meant to target unsustainable fishing. And if you're not taking fish that are too small, if you're not taking fish that are more than what you need, I think this fisheries management plan is going to have little to no effect on you. So I invite you to kind of think about your day-to-day fishing and whether it falls under any of those categories. But we'll take Rob Koss as an example of the average fisher goes fishing, and he catches 7 fish only one of those species is part of the 10 that have a minimum size limit. Again, right, we have over 100 fish in our fishery. He catches 7, one falls under a size limit that he almost meets but doesn't. Robert Costa is mandated to report his catch if this becomes a thing, mandatory licensing and catch reporting. So if he's intercepted by a DAR fisheries tech, he is not allowed to turn down an interview, but that only leads to better data about our fish populations by reporting what you've caught. If you don't report your catch, that can almost seem like that fish was far and few during that survey period, that survey year. But at the end of the day, Rob still has plenty of fish to kind of take home for dinner. Only one of them falls under a size limit, and he primarily goes during the day. And if only commercial nighttime spearfishing is banned, he's a recreational fisher, he does have a permit, and his catch falls under 25 pounds if that's a limit for night. There we go. So again, I think the big thing that I'm trying to emphasize with this point is that this fisheries management plan is really only going to have effect on people that are catching fish that are too small for those 9 species. We want fish to have the chance to reproduce and spawn before they've entered the fishery. And if you're not catching more than what you need, overfishing, overexploitation, so again, this fisheries management plan is meant to kind of promote more sustainable ways of fishing and recognizing that there are some forms of unsustainable fishing that are occurring, and how does DARA as an agency kind of help to regulate that, and how do we as a community kind of contribute to fish for future generations. So now we are going to go into detail about what each of these measures would mean for the day-to-day fisher. So I'll invite Mr. Brent Hibbets up to the mic. Don't forget to mention the benefits of the size limit.
What's that?
Don't forget to mention the benefits of the size limit. That's for fairness thing.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all again for coming down. My colleagues have said it, and I'm going to repeat it. We really do appreciate you coming down, providing input, and telling us what you like, what you don't like about this. My name is Brent. I'm a biologist with the Department of Agriculture, along with several of my colleagues you've met tonight. I am going to take my life in my hands and step over the danger tape here so I can point more closely at the screen. I'm going to be talking about the proposed size limits for fish, what and how these fish were chosen for that, and what they may mean for these populations. You see, fish, these 8 species are being proposed for a 12-inch catch limit. And do we have the wooden things? We have a couple of models of a couple of these species that are 12 inches in length, just to give you a feel for what a 12-inch fish looks like or feels like. So check these out and see if that falls within what you fish for or not. These species, a 12-inch size for these fish means that that's the size that these fish have been able to reproduce. That allows these fish to have had babies before they're taken in a fishery to produce babies for the next generation of fish coming along. You'll see that many of these are parrotfish. These parrotfish species are the larger, slower growing parrotfish species. We have many other species on Guam that are smaller than this that these size limits would not apply to. They don't get to 12 inches, or they reproduce so quickly that a 12-inch limit is not necessary because they're able to handle the fishing pressure we're seeing on Guam. So in addition to the parrotfish, the things like the matanhagan, the tataga, and the tarakitu. Now, one thing that was brought up at earlier meetings that we agree with is that a 12-inch size limit doesn't make sense if you're going to be fishing for EE. So there would be a size limit for EE. EE would be allowed to be taken, and then there would be a size where you couldn't take them, and then again at 12 inches you could take them again. There would be a teenage size or a middle-aged size that would be off limits, and then larger ones again you'd be able to take, and EE would be able to take again. Okay, so again, a proposal, the 12-inch size on these gives them time to reproduce, to produce another generation of young before they are harvested. Now, Tangisan, they are larger and slower growing still than these fish, so the proposed size limit for Tangisan would be 24 inches. And we have these 2 pictures of Tangisan on the screen because we want to make sure that people know that this is a juvenile tangeson. This is an adult tangeson. We see young tangeson caught by fishermen frequently, and frequently fishermen don't realize that that is a tangeson that they have caught. They think it's another kind of fish. So we just want to get pictures and educational materials out to let people know that that is a young tangeson, and that if this limit does go through, that it would be a 24-inch size limit before you're allowed to harvest that fish. Okay. Now, in addition to the size limit to allow them to reproduce, for things like the parrotfish and the tangeson, there's another really important factor for this, is those fish, when they are born, they are all females. Parrotfish and wrasses are all females when they're young. As they get bigger, they turn into males. If you don't allow them to get big enough to turn into males, you end up with a really screwy population setup. You have a bunch of females and no males. You can't have any reproduction because there are no males around. So the 12-inch size limit also permits the species that have that kind of life history to reach maturity as the required gender to allow for reproduction. And that's actually, it's a very common life history in reef fishes. Parrotfish do it, wrasses do it, groupers do it, mafuti do it. There's lots of groups of fish that go through a sex change as they get older. And so giving a 12-inch size limit allows the species that do that to reach size enough to change into the other gender to, again, to facilitate reproduction. Okay? And the next slide, now this is a little sciencey. I'm trying to avoid the sciencey. All this is this is a bunch of growth curves of the species where size limits are being proposed. And what a growth curve is just showing you, like, if a fish is 0 years of age, this is the average size of that fish. If they're 5 years of age, this is the average size of fish. This is years of age, and this is length in inches. So it just take a whole bunch of measurements of this species of fish, and starting at about 0 of age, very youngest ones are down around this size, and then as they grow, you get up to this, you get to a point where they really don't get much longer anymore, and that's about the maximum size that fish reaches. So what these red lines in here are, again, I'm sorry, this is age and this is length. The red line shows where they reach reproductive maturity, where they're old enough to have babies. And so what you can do with this, you look at the age, 2.5 years, this mark here, you go up to where the growth curve intersects that red line is when that fish is old enough to reproduce. 2.5 years old, these parrotfish can have babies. And so by putting a 12-inch size limit on these fish, you're not going to have to wait 8 or 10 or 12 years for them to get big enough to harvest and big enough to reproduce. You'll find that most of the fish on the size limit proposal, it takes less than 3 years for them to reach reproductive size. And that's starting from 0. Most of these fish, there are already young ones out on the reef. So you're not going to be waiting 3 years for them to be big enough to harvest. It would be maybe a year, maybe 6 months, maybe a year and a half. About the only species in here where the length is longer than that would be the tangeson. Again, much bigger and much slower growing. With the maturity size, they are about 5 years old before that growth curve intersects the reproductive maturity size. So that would be one you'd have to wait longer to get to harvestable size. But most of the parrotfish, the matanhagan, the tataga, the terakitu, 3 years or less, and they would be of harvestable and reproductive maturity size. Okay. And I think that's all I have for this. There is, again, a QR code if you want to scan to look at the reports that show these growth curves and this information. And if you're not comfortable doing that, you can let us know. We can email you an electronic copy, or we can print out a hard copy for you as well.
No proxies, local data, not like other island areas.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, one thing, Leilani mentioned this earlier, we want to reinforce it, that these growth curves and this information was based on studies done on Guam fish. We're not using studies from Hawaii or from Australia or from other islands and making them fit Guam fish. All 9 studies or 10 studies that were used to generate this information were all studies of Guam fish and Guam fish populations only. So I want to make sure that it's clear that these are all things here. We're not trying to make somebody else's stuff fit our populations. This is all Guam stuff that was done. Right? And now I think Andrew again will come over. So thank you.
right, so continuing on, the second proposed measure that we briefly discussed earlier was the no harvesting of a tuhum. And like I had mentioned, they are not present in our data sets or our observations when we go to inshore or offshore surveys at work. And while we have the scuba spearfishing ban and also the MPAs to try and promote the success of this important species, it's still lacking, or we're not capturing it in our data. So since this is a large species that grows very slowly, we want to put a protective measure in place now so that when the time comes, it will already be set in stone and we have a protective measure moving forward and promoting the success of this species. Therefore, if this were to go through, then one long-term benefit of this proposed measure would be to bring back the adult tuhum population in Guam's waters and also promote reef resilience and other things like food security. Next slide, please. The third proposed measure was the mandatory licensing and reporting. We capture a lot of the fishing effort and fishing community of Guam through our Creole surveys, our inshore surveys, and also from other projects like Lani's master's thesis. But if we don't have a mandatory licensing and reporting in place, then a lot of the effort and the community and what they're catching will go unnoticed or not captured in our data sets. And so when we don't have a clear picture, then we can't make informed management decisions, and we might be pushing for something in the wrong way rather than the proper way it should be in order to achieve our goal. And having this licensing and reporting measure would also help us track the trends over time, like what kind of fishing pressure is on the rise, like who's into what kind of fishing now, or what's everybody catching, what's everybody not catching, stuff like that. And this is all data that we can share back to the community and keep the community informed as well. It's not just for us to collect data and then harbor it in our servers. So the fourth measure was the ban on commercial sales for 6 species. And the 6 species that we're referring to are the Napoleon wrasse, the steephead parrotfish, the long-nosed parrotfish, tan-faced parrotfish, filament fin parrotfish, and the ember parrotfish. And people notice that these are important species to our reef ecosystem and the health of our reefs, but they also experience a lot of fishing pressure because people enjoy eating them, or they're commonly caught and commonly targeted. So we want people to keep fishing for these in the future. It's not like we want to stop you guys. We want to promote the health of these fish species so that people can continue to go fishing for them. But like the data shows, they're large and slow-growing species, and the data is indicating that their populations and their sizes are decreasing over time. And the most recent NOAA stock assessment also confirmed what our data shows, that the species is over-harvested and depleted. And this was data collected from scientific divers going in and observing the reef fish populations, and also from the Fishermen's Co-op biosampling program. And putting a commercial sales ban on these 6 species would help us increase populations of these ecologically and culturally important species of parrotfish and wrasse. So back to the 5th proposed measure, and that was to put some sort of regulation on the nighttime spearfishing operations that go on. And so the benefit of this would be to allow small reef fish species that are commonly collected to protect those guys and not allow commercial fishermen, or how do I say this? unaware fishermen to take the small fish from the reef. And so the first measure was the prohibiting only commercial spearfishing and allowing recreational and subsistence, or cutting off the spearfishing activity for a certain number of months out of the year, or just completely banning nighttime spearfishing for both commercial and subsistence and recreational spearfishing, and then analyzing the impacts or the effectiveness of the policy, and then coming back to the table with our fishing community to present the data and then see what's working and what's not working and how we can move forward together. Thank you guys for your time. Oh, I was going to keep this.
All right, so that was a lot. At this time, we're going to take some clarifying questions in regards to the measures. You guys probably have some other questions of how these might work, what it might mean for us. So, yeah, that's the way. And hopefully, we'll take a couple minutes to do this. We'll see how long it takes, and then we'll move into activities that are meant to capture everybody's individual feedback. And then if we get time to do the second activity, that one's more of a representative group, kind of come off the mic and do a reporting out session. So just keep that in mind, that there are also opportunities to give feedback on any of these proposed measures. So we'll take questions now. And we have Joey and the G3CC that can help us get some mics around. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you. Felix has a question.
I'll give you input to ask how long will this plan before, or are there plans for revisited how many years down the road?
I'm sorry, ask that one more time.
How long is this plan for the infection? Will it be revisited again?
Our other divisions have plans that are generally 5-year increments, and then you revisit them and you have to rewrite them. We have to do that as a requirement. So it's not like, oh, 5 years, do we want to redo it? No, we don't. We have to, it's mandatory. We can build that same thing into this plan where we revisit it. And this, again, we're talking about what is gonna go into the plan. The plan hasn't been drafted, it hasn't been written. These are all the options we're presenting to the community. So when we actually do have a draft, we're gonna come back to the community again so you can review the actual document and see if we stand by our word and put it in writing what we all talked about. So I think 5 years is a good round number, and then you revisit the plan in 5 years and see if everything's working or what the data shows, or should we leave it a little longer? Should we change anything in general? Sorry, yes, where's the microphone? Oh, Farron, and then we come back up to the front and then over here.
Yeah, so I understand these are not regulations yet, they're options, and you're taking your time, but like realistically, how soon could we see any or all of them?
We're hoping for a draft by the end of the year, honestly. That's our goal right now, because this is the 3rd community meeting. We're gonna take all the input, we'll meet again, then we'll start drafting based on all that input and then bring that out to the community around the end of the year.
Quick follow-up, when would implementation be at the soonest?
That's a good question. Usually, well, we want extensive outreach before we implement the plan. We don't want to just have a plan, we adopted it, and then start citing people or, So usually 60 to 90 days to roll out, but we have to build a really comprehensive education and outreach before we do that. So 90 days, maybe even 120. Mr. Lanetta had a question here first. Oh, sorry.
It's not very loud.
That's not very loud. How do we make that one louder?
Or I can just talk. So hey, half a day. I attended the Townhall meeting yesterday, and I felt compelled to come here tonight take a long drive from Winning all the way down to the south of this beautiful drive. So I really enjoyed coming here. Last night I didn't say anything. I listened, and I had some questions, but I just thought, hey, I let people get the chance. So tonight I've got a lot of questions, but I also want to make a statement. I'm Filipino, but I grew up here on Guam. I wasn't born here, but I grew up in the north, and I had the distinct pleasure of being able to swim in Inalåhan. And I remember growing up as a teenager, going to Inalåhan, gula, fish. I can almost touch them because they're all over. If I go there tomorrow, wow, big difference. So in my memory banks, I remembered so much fish, and it's like they're gone. And so I'm thinking the key word on what DOAG is trying to do is sustainability. Something needs to be done. And it's a start, and it's something. Because if we don't do anything, then, we're talking about the generations not being able to enjoy what I enjoy in my life. I would like to see my children and grandchildren enjoy the ability.
Yes. So I'm saying the microphone, go there, and then come to you.
Several years ago, I got a boat because it was hard to fish shoreline. And it's easier to go out with a boat and then go along the shoreline and fish.
The program.
But
It's not a comment.
people last night were talking about culture.
Yes, you're right. Okay, sorry. No, I'll tell him.
Yeah, there's a difference between fishing in the shoreline and fishing on a boat. And it feels more natural to fish on
So he's saying Mr. Lynette is giving a comment. He's not asking questions. It's not a comment period.
I support what's happening, and so sustainability. I'm a food security kind of guy. The director mentioned farming and fishing to sustain Guam. She missed something. Hunting. There's pigs, there's deer, there's chickens.
Excuse me. I'm sorry to cut you off. This is not a comment period.
He's just saying they want to ask questions.
Okay,
and
so
not
it's a segue to the questions that I have. Okay, so I didn't want to ask questions and kind of be rude as to why I'm asking these questions. But anyway, just wanted to make that statement that I support what's happening. What is a data set? Question one, what is a data set?
What is a data set?
How long of a period? Because I understand there's like 6 or 9 data sets.
Well, it depends on, so different ones had different data sets. I know for the one that Leilani was presenting, there were 9 different data sets. So that was considered a meta-analysis. Can you say what different data sets those were? And I know some of the data went back as far as the 70s, all the way up to, was it, Peter, what was the year? The data sets went from the 70s up to 2021.
So there's like 6 different
There
data
were
sets?
9 different data sets, but they span from the 70s when data first started being collected all the way up to 2021.
And all on Guam?
All on Guam.
Okay. Last night I saw a slide that had Palau and some of the other islands
Yes.
and the regulations that we I don't remember seeing it.
Yes, she did present that. She had the different
Okay.
maps.
So when I saw that, I go, wow, and Guam doesn't have a...
Guam doesn't have any.
Okay. To me, that's critical. Commercial sales of fish. I've seen in the stores like Payless and there's one in the north of Guam, a grocery store that sells fish from other countries like Taiwan and Palau and things like that. So that doesn't, this program
This won't change
doesn't
that.
affect that. So,
No.
Because they're selling parrotfish
Yes.
and they're selling fish that are part of the group of 9.
Yes, but those are imported fish, so this wouldn't affect that.
So will this have to be approved by the legislature? And is there an impact? Because there could be some legal and criminal ramifications for going against the regulation, right?
Yes.
Or this. So would this have to go through the legislature?
Yes, as any plan, it has to go through the administrative adjudication law process.
Okay, and that will take time, of course.
Yes. It's not that long of a process, but yes. Okay, next question.
Hello, Tess.
Yes.
So I have a question about the nighttime spearfishing proposal.
Yes.
You have 3 on your island, Micronesian island slide, and you showed that there were other Micronesian islands that have these regulations in place for nighttime spearfishing. Looking into those islands, which one of the 3 that you have up there in the proposal is the most effective in terms of protecting and allowing the fish to be more sustainable of the 3 choices up there?
I honestly don't know that answer. I will ask Dr. Haupt, do you know that answer?
I can answer for Micronesian region that none, there is no ban on nighttime fishing in any of the Micronesian islands. They're not banned. It's also unavailable like it is.
Okay.
There is no ban on nighttime fishing.
Did you hear? So there's no ban on nighttime fishing in any of the other islands. It is being considered in some of them. Yes.
Which
Oh.
of the 3 then is going to be the most effective to protect the fish?
This is where I offer my opinion, and it's just my opinion. My opinion is that the most effective would be the total ban, the total moratorium, because it's the easiest to enforce. We offer up the others because we had fishers that were really opposed to a nighttime ban. So we said, well, you know, there's a lot of complaints coming from the communities, a lot coming from down south about nighttime spearfishing. So what would you offer? What would you suggest? So then there were the options for, there were the options for the ban on just commercial fishing. But if you ban just commercial nighttime spearfishing, what's to stop anyone from saying they're a subsistence fisher, spearfishing at night, catching a whole lot of fish, and then selling it in the morning saying these were caught in the morning? It's not really enforceable because people can always make up a story about it. I also really like the other one that was seasonal, where you close for nighttime spearfishing during the year, but you open up again for Easter or for the holidays when people are more likely to want to catch a lot of fish. But we put that up there as options because we want to hear from you. What do you think? This is a strong regulation and it's controversial. So we want to know what the community thinks. And then there's an activity that Leilani is going to walk everyone through later, and you can offer your perspective. And it's actually kind of surprising what we see. And you'll get to see that after we have all the questions. I know there was, who has the microphone now? So one question here, then we will go to you, sir, and then we will go to you, okay? Yes.
Okay, they say that a lot of reefs are depleted from just the grass fires and then the pollution that's on.
Maybe I'm too close to you.
Adding more artificial reefs out there to supplement the fish habitat. You know, we're farming coral.
Yes.
Already. Why can't we plug in fish habitat where they can plant coral and to add more fish habitat for our fish?
You're actually sitting right next to our biologist who leads that entire program for our agency, and she's been doing an amazing job with planting out with coral outplantings. Ashton, this is Ashton Williams. She's actually pretty phenomenal, and we had this conversation. I said, I think the coral program should come down. She's like, and I'll tell you, she said, I don't want to go down there. They don't want to hear from me. I don't want to be the white girl standing up talking about this stuff in front of everybody. But she's really brilliant at her job. And since she's been in her position, she's brought in, I don't even know how many millions of dollars in grants, all for coral outplanting. And she's started a bunch of coral nurseries in PD, Assen. Is there any down here?
Not down here. The other nursery is at Family Beach.
At Family Beach, and then she's expanded them. And she's taken her team. For when we hired her, there were 2 of them. Right now there's 6. And she's telling me, Director, I don't think we should even be down here at the agency anymore because we're gonna have 17 people. All federally funded. She's finding all the money herself. So we are doing that. We are doing that, but we've also been paying attention to our neighbors. Hawaii's been doing really interesting work with artificial reefs. They have a professor there right now who's using cinder blocks, and they build them up to, I want to say 6 feet to 9 feet high, and he's testing how effective those are at becoming reefs. There's a project with DARPA, you know, the Department of Defense group that tests if goats can be telepathic. They started giving money for an artificial reef project in Honolulu and Florida, and now they're fighting with them because they want to talk about who's going to have ownership of those artificial reefs when it comes time to remove them. The military wants to install them, but they don't want to pay to have them taken out. So now Florida and Hawaii are fighting with them about it. I really like the idea of what we do with the coral outplanting, because you're right, it's completely tied to our fisheries and the fish and the ecosystem health. So we're working the natural solutions right now, but we are watching what other people are doing with artificial reefs.
And I also just quickly add, there's a lot of safety concerns with artificial reefs because they don't really cement themselves down and join together.
Wait, you can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
There, go. There.
During typhoons, those structures can move and they can cause damage to corals, they can cause damage to structures. It's really hard to predict what they're going to do in a storm, so it's a risky solution. So we're focusing on live coral right now, but there have been considerations about artificial reefs, specifically for marine habitat.
Excellent question though, thank you. And then, right here. Wait, Joey. Right here.
So, I got a question about the techniques used for fishing.
I'm sorry?
About techniques used for fishing.
Okay, the techniques used for fishing.
As this thing applies, are there any regulations about technique fishing?
Right now, the only regulations we have are about gill nets and surround nets.
And that's a mesh size?
It's net size and also how long you can leave them in the water for the surround nets.
And the catch from this program would apply to size and all of that?
Yes. Well, yes, at least for the size limits and then the commercial sales of those 6. Wait.
You cannot sell gill net caught fish.
You also cannot sell gill net caught fish. That's some of the regulations that currently exist.
I would like to know more about the meetings where these recommendations were collected. I saw that there was a listing of 10 meetings over the course of 5 years, and only one of them was in the south, in a southern village, Santa Rita.
Oh, okay. Well, there was also the meetings that Leilani had held, but those are under the University of Guam. So the ones we put here were specifically with the Department of Agriculture. But if you have questions, or would you, I mean, what else would you like to know more about? The guys who held the meetings are right here.
You know, I'm just curious because we're from the West, right? And we are sitting on the preserve, right? Or that's our family area, so we've given that up. And so I'm curious, you know, I want to know what was the input that Leslie gave for these recommendations.
I don't know if we can pinpoint.
You're just too close to her. You have to move like away
For
from her.
Molesto, but during our southern meeting, some of the concerns brought up were a lot of undersized fish. One in particular.
Can you
not in the
also come
FMP
talk
meeting, but on a Westpac Navigating Change meeting. One of the
Can you also talk about some of the community meetings you held down south? Or the...
His concern
Yeah, we're going to talk
is
about that.
Heat. If all of you that have been in the water growing up, heat is all over the place and super abundant. And he has not seen heat in a long time. They're depleting. And he said he has reports, and he's seen groups of people coming in with 350 quart coolers full of really undersized pizza. But it's this repetitive story over and over of these types of actions that are making us aware of this. And I want to make it clear that when we were going out into the community, we weren't pushing an agenda. Like Rob said, it was an open forum. And trust me, we know that there's a lot of issues regarding fishing. We were getting hammered about our fads. We need the fads out there. We want fishing pressure taken off the reef. We need an alternative. The alternative to that is pelagic fishing, fishing off of the reef. And what are we doing to support that? We take that to heart. 5 years later, all of these recommendations are actually coming to fruition. We heard a lot about we need more education and outreach, more youth programs. Our aquatic education is phenomenal. We used to do 1 kids fishing derby a year. We're up to maybe 4 fishing derbies a year, shore-based. The mayor of Molesto in August is sponsoring a boat-based kids fishing derby in the Cocos Lagoon. Okay? So we're growing the program. A lot of the youth programs have been shore-based. We're concentrating on advanced fishing techniques, trying to bring kids offshore to take pressure off the reef. So we have in place a spearfishing safety course. We got some of our teams certified in spearfishing safety because we want to educate kids on how to culturally take things, but also be safe. We understand that there's a big thing about MPAs being in some of the most calm, pristine waters, and it's not safe to go to the more treacherous windward eastern side. So we're starting spearfishing safety course.
We can also give it to Lana.
Everything that the community has said. Some of the other comments were supporting the boating industry. Like we need more marine mechanics. I want to let you guys know that we've worked with GCC to start a boot camp for small marine engine repair. They need 12 students to start it. They have about 6 or 7. So if you guys know anyone that's interested in becoming a marine engine repair mechanic, sign up. So all of these things, not just fishing regulations. We took all of the information and we all divvied up the assignments and we're all chipping away and tackling all of these things.
And it wasn't just their meetings. We had come down.
I just want to stress that I don't think that one meeting for the South.
Oh, well, that's what I'm trying to say. It wasn't. No. So we had other meetings here that were not specific to that. I can't even remember what the meetings were that we came here for, but we ended up talking about fishing. And it was in this room where I heard the nighttime fishing ban. It was also in this room with fishers where we talked about the different components of talaza fishing and being able to catch, I think it was tatagat. And then I also want to bring up Leilani because she had more one-on-one surveys with fishers who were specifically from down south. So that also came into informing the decision.
Opinion. Do you think that this is an accurate representation of fishermen from the South to have one meeting and one meeting here in Inalåhan? What is your outreach plan before you enact these bans for the South specifically to gather their opinions and their concerns?
Okay, I hear you, and yes, there was one meeting that was talked about on the board, or listed on the board, because that meeting was specific to the fisheries management plan question. But what I'm saying is that we were also down here as an agency for other meetings and other events that were not specific to the fisheries management plan development, but we also spoke with fishers in the community specifically about what they would like to see, what the challenges are, and what the concerns that they have. And then Leilani.
But that's not offering them the opportunity to come out and give their input in the same way as this forum.
Well, this is the first one that we're having for this forum down south. And the one we had yesterday was the first one for this forum that we had in the Central, and then Monday was the first one that we had up north. This is the first time we're coming out to talk about the fisheries management plan, fish being identified or the species being identified, and this is the first time we're talking about the measurement or the the management options. This is the first time.
Justin, I think she's asking you, what is your, now that you guys have some guidelines that you like to set, what's your plan? Are you gonna, I think more of the fishermen and especially for her family because they have the preserve down there, they want to be heard. So she's asking you, what is your outreach plan from now till you plan to come up with the information plan? That's what she's asking.
How much more opportunity is there
Oh, okay.
to offer their input?
I'm sorry.
Specifically.
Okay.
Before they're implemented.
So after this meeting, thank you. I misunderstood your question. I apologize. So after this meeting, our plan is to create a report based on this, sort of, I guess, turn it into a draft plan, and then have more public outreach for the plan. So we'll probably do it again where we have north, central, south, and have meetings to go over the components of the plan. And then after that, we'll generate another final draft plan and probably do that again. And then if the plan gets adopted or when it gets adopted, because something needs to get adopted, that's when we're going to, before we implement any of the regulations, that was what I meant when I said we want to have extensive education and outreach. And we tried, I mean, even for this meeting, we circulated announcements for months trying to ensure that we had enough representation for the community, from the community.
Can I just ask you, since you're doing that and planning, could you please put PD as one of your places to have an outreach because we have a big preserve there? And I would really, you know, we've got a lot of the traditional fishermen there, a lot of them are old, they cannot drive down south.
Okay.
And even to go for Central, the timing is a little bit late, and if you can have it on the weekend.
So the consideration for the weekday was totally thinking about the fishers. Yes, but we can totally do that. But we went with the weekdays. We tried to start early, like at 5:30, considering when people will get off work. And we wanted it on the weekdays because fishers generally go fishing on the weekends. Wait, we have one more guy behind you. If you're done, if you're not done. Sure. Absolutely.
I think more than one village in the south should be represented for this.
Okay, we can do that even before we develop the draft. The guy behind you. Half a day.
Hi, ma'am. I'm just gonna go back to the night fishing. I just feel like, why would like putting a complete ban on it be an option if you're already gonna implement a mandatory size limit for fish?
It's just up there for consideration, and then you'll have an opportunity to kind of vote. And like I said, we knew that that was going to be the most controversial. We just wanted to see what people thought about it, and surprisingly, or you'll see surprisingly what generally the community felt, at least in the north and central, and then everyone here will have the option to put up their thoughts as well.
Some of us don't go night fishing to catch fish. We actually harvest other species like lobster.
And that wouldn't, oh, that's true, yeah.
Right? So if you put stop to night fishing,
So, and lobsters, you're not allowed to harvest with a spear, right?
No.
Oh. So that would also be different. With the night spear fishing, we were looking at it as how you have hunting, and poaching at night is against the law. So it's called prima facie if you're caught with a light and a shotgun. So for night spear fishing, if you're caught with a light and a spear gun, that's prima facie evidence that you're illegally spear fishing at night. But if you were out catching lobster with a light, that wouldn't apply.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm sorry, man, I don't even know who's in order anymore. Joey's gonna try to get to everybody.
Have you considered, is there a representative from EPA here? Because a lot of the factors these fishermen know, being in the water, it's not really, I mean, overfishing is one thing, but environmental factors are another.
Absolutely.
And the ocean, we are in dire need of some help from the Are they here to represent? You know, because runoff, environmental factors are what is causing the depletion of fish.
Yes.
Not really fishermen. You go out there, the fishermen are the one that's suffering. The fishermen don't see the fish that we used to see 20 years ago. And this is coming from environmental factors. Where's EPA tonight? Are they here to answer those questions? So instead of like putting it on the fishermen, put it on also our government has to be accountable for this because they need to help the fishermen as well. That's my question.
I absolutely agree with you. And one of the earlier slides that Leilani had showed that the different impacts were like climate change, land-based sources of pollution, and also erosion. And I don't want to, we didn't invite EPA, so it's not their fault that they're not here, absolutely. But we've also been working, University of Guam has done turbidity studies to measure the water quality. We work with EPA nationally through our coral program to address water quality issues. I believe Ashton even has a proposal to start collecting water quality measures all over the different parts of the island, especially where the corals grow, where all the fish are at. One of my first questions to her was, are we doing that in the eastern side too? And then we have our forestry division that addresses tree planting. They count thousands of trees every year, and they fight wildland fires in efforts to reduce the erosion that is impacting our region or our island. We also engage in our pig hunting derbies. We specifically target pigs. I mean, we used to have, what was it, like one derby a year. We've been trying to have at least up to 4 every year so that we can help reduce the ungulate population, which greatly contributes to the erosion issue. But there is also research that's been done with Guam, specifically with Tatagat, comparing water quality issues from land-based sources of pollution and comparing it with fishing pressure. And what was found in that is that they both have negative impacts, but the fishing pressure had a larger impact on the reduction of the Tatagat population than the land-based sources of pollution. And that study also aligned with the same results that they had in American Samoa. But that's not to say we understand what that feels like, but we're not trying to say we're only targeting fishermen. I say all of that to try and convey that we get it, and we're trying to figure out holistic solutions for everything. And even when we do outreach, Ashton will tell you, they were used to doing outreach by themselves with coral or fisheries with just fish stuff. But now I'm always making them go out together and with our forestry team so that we can keep pushing out to the community that it's from ridge to reef. All of that impacts each other, and we need to work to solve all of it, not just one thing at a time.
What about invasive species as well?
Yes, absolutely. Ashton has, sorry, not picking on you. She got a $2 million grant to address marine invasive species. We also have our chief entomologist, Dr. Chris Rosario, who works with the terrestrial invasive species. We were the reasons that, it's bragging a little bit, but we're the reasons that the Department of Interior Office of Insular Affairs now holds regional invasive species training on Guam, because we kept pushing the issue on how we impact the region generally because we're the hub, but also all the stuff comes through here from everywhere else. And so we're really exposed. So we try to tackle that too. He had his hand first, and then can we come back to you, sir?
Me?
Yes.
Yes, nighttime fishing, does that include no fishing on low tide?
You mean with Talaza?
No.
You mean? Oh.
It's a spear you hold in your hand.
Oh, okay, sorry. That was what Mr. Laguarnia was talking about. I don't know, I kind of think I want to have more about that conversation, because when Mr. Laguarnia mentioned that the other night, I thought that was kind of cool. And then Brent mentioned that there were over 60 different traditional techniques that aren't even really used now. There's only 10. So I think if we had a nighttime ban on spearfishing with a light, I think it would be way different. And I'd really like to open the conversation to considering any traditional techniques that are used and making that exempt. so that you would still be allowed. Because the take from that is vastly different than the take from a spear gun with a flashlight. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you think planting trees will 100% stop erosion?
It's a significant contributor, absolutely. But the pigs are the big one too.
It's going to stop fire, but not erosion.
Well, no, the trees when they grow, and we plant native and then.
There's no grass to hold soil.
No, but the tree's roots, that's what holds the soil more than the grass because the tree's roots go deeper.
I grew up in Mauricio, and in the jungle, there's no grass, and when it rains hard, there's a lot of runoff.
It also depends on where the
rain rains hard, it lays down and acts as a layer to hold the water out.
So the idea that we are working with is, yes, the trees are there to prevent the fires. And the fires burn the native grass, and then they allow the invasive grasses to grow. And those don't hold the soil as well. So we work with trying to plant the trees and also native and endemic bushes to reduce the fire and reduce the impacts of fire. But the trees also work to hold the soil together. Absolutely, if you have grass everywhere, that works even better. But we're trying to get more native grasses back rather than the invasive grasses.
Okay, another thing, the runoff.
Yes.
Have you ever guys looked at the sewer line?
Absolutely. And
if it rains hard and it overflows,
yes.
Can you imagine what you use in the washer?
It's even worse than that.
And you blame erosion for.
No, so when we say erosion, we also say land-based sources of pollution. Land-based sources of pollution are what we talk about that come from the urban areas, like the streets and the runoff like you're talking about from the sewer, but also the gutters and the round ones, like the culverts that are created, and that's actually super detrimental because it narrows the water and where it runs out into the ocean. So you're getting larger volumes of water at a much higher speed than they would if they were just naturally draining everywhere. So that's also a problem, but for the last 2 years, we've had meetings with Department of Interior, DPW, and other agencies to try to create what are called nature-based solutions so that we can repair the former thinking when they had a good intention when they created those, like the cement, what are they, culverts, gutters, whatever. But when they created them, the intent was good, but the outcome, the unintended consequence of that was that you had huge amounts of runoff water. So now we're trying to figure out how do we solve that problem. And they're exploring everything from different types of porous concrete so that it slows the water and absorbs it more, so it reduces the impact of those running off. And there's a lot of other things, but yes, I hear what you're saying, and we consider that a land-based source of pollution, and it's addressed differently than erosion. But we are looking at that as well. That's not even our lane, but we still like to kind of push ourselves into there and say, hey, explore this option because it still concerns us in the end. I mean, can you imagine DPW's like, what does agriculture know about paving roads and putting in culverts, but we're offering them suggestions. We actually found...
I'm not talking only about runoff from the mountain. I'm talking about...
No, these are from the streets. Yes.
The sewer line?
Yes.
And you imagine what you're using in the washer, your cleaning dishes, everything is running off to the ocean.
Yes.
So maybe that's part of this 100% killing the coral.
Yes.
Runoff from the ocean, not from the hill.
Okay.
I mean, that's been going on. Before you were born, it was been going on in this island.
Yes.
And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I hear you.
Buenas noches to the council.
Half a day.
Okay, thank you, Department of Agriculture, for actually having this, giving the people a chance to talk. But right now, Department of Agriculture, you're on a slippery slope. How many implementations of, you're on the right track, conservation is a great thing. Protecting the resource for the next generations, not for tomorrow, but for years and years to come. Yes. question is that how many of these impacts, how many of these implementations have been created that have had zero effect? I can name some. How many marine MPAs are in effect, but yet we still say the resource is going down? That's one. How many laws have been created? No gill netting against them. The size of the gill net, the length of the gill net. Nothing's changed, right? Implemented the scuba ban on spearfishing. Nothing's changed. In fact, it's gotten worse. Our family was directly affected. Ozzy, okay, pues they forbade the giga from Minnesota and anywhere on Guam because they were blaming the giga, that's why there's no fish. The giga was a very, very effective way of fishing. It caught a lot of fish, yes, but guess what? The things that you don't want, you throw back out. That's true. That is the truth. But even though they banned the giga, marine MPAs, all of this, ma'am, what's the guarantee that if you do any of these, that they would be undone? If you put a moratorium for X amount of years, it might be 2X, 3X, 4X. So the idea is that we should be very careful. Please, thank you for all this good conservation. It's really important. It's absolutely important. What's to make you think that if a person got a fishing license, they're really going to take a picture of their catch and report it to you? How many people get caught in the preserves and nothing happens to them? And those people are the ones that are doing this for a living. And those are the people that they catch all the heat that's just very bigger than anything you can, and you realize that the people that are doing the damage are not here. Where are they? Thank you everyone for coming out. This is a really good forum. Thank you agriculture for taking the lead. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to try and answer a bunch of your questions. I might forget, so I'll ask you to remind me. No, so we did actually try to have our first meeting with the community of people that you're talking about. We tried to have a meeting, our first meeting with the FSM community. No one showed up.
I didn't say FSM.
Okay. I'm just, as an example. And I don't know your name, so. But then that didn't work. But we're not giving up. The very questions we asked ourselves was, then what do? Do we need to take ourselves to their community? That's absolutely on our agenda. So when we add a visit to Malesu for this, before we create any draft, we're still gonna go out and try and catch them at their communities, at the stores, at different places. We are not giving up on reaching the community that's also gonna be directly impacted by this, because they're part of the fishing community too, regardless of how you feel.
Are they citizens?
Doesn't matter. We're Guam, we're US territory. We have to consider everybody. And then with regard to the MPAs and the scuba ban. So what I've also learned through all of this process for the last 5 years is that when the MPAs were created, they were working, but then something shifted. And it coincided with the massive increase in the number of fishers on Guam, and United no longer increasing the cargo rates for importing to Guam. So then people stopped importing fish to sell at the markets, and they started fishing in our waters. That increased the number of poaching events, and it increased the number of fishers on Guam substantially. I mean, can you think when you ever saw this many fishers around the island? That's different. It's much different than it was 10 to 20 years ago.
These are just they're not telling you that they're fishing.
Okay. And what was the other? See, I told you I was going to forget your other point.
MPAs are working in the MPAs, right? Outside the MPAs, they're not working. In the MPAs, they're working.
I'm sorry, I did forget your other question though. Okay.
It's a slippery slope. What's to prevent this from just perpetuating and keep going? And instead of, you know what, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And this is great intentions. And so what's happening is that with the good intention of preserving the resource for tomorrow, you're inhibiting the rights of the people today. And I respect it.
Okay.
You're doing a good job.
Do you have other options that we should consider then?
I used to own a fish store. I used to sell fish, right? And spearfishing is always the absolute most selective way of fishing, because I choose to shoot you.
That one fish.
nests are non-selected, they catch it all. Then let God sort it out, which one stays, which one gets left at the beach for the woman to eat, you know. But this is true. But when you got people that land a mama, their glasses is not good. Everything looks big to them until they get out of the water and eat. It's child abuse. This is a counter abuse already.
I understand that, and that's part of why we also came up with these different options, because we're not trying to punish the good fisher to get, you know, to stop the bad fisher. But at the same time, what other options are there that we can choose from? Another question.
Yeah, I just had a question about that catch reporting, like if there was any ideas that you guys have floating around and what are they?
Yes.
It's all honor-based.
No, well, so the idea that is everybody gets a license. Commercial fishers pay for their license. Subsistence fishers, we have it's in the law that we're supposed to have a bona fide fisher program, just like the bona fide farmer program. It's a free program. You come, you register, you're a bona fide farmer, you would be a bona fide fisher. Then you would report.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
So
yeah,
the idea is that people want to contribute and report. The subsistence fisher, mind you. The commercial fisher would be required to report their catch, and the commercial vendor. So that's where we would do the monitoring, is at the vendor level, because that's the more easily enforceable area. We would have our conservation officers go to the different fish vendors, the different restaurants that buy fish, the different hotels, and monitor the reporting data. And they would have to identify which commercial fisher, based on their license number, that they bought that fish from. The subsistence fisher, we're trying to figure out how to make it easy so that they don't mind reporting. So the map that Leilani was showing you, where Rob Cost caught 7 fish, that's a map with a ruler on it, and we're working with contractors. There's an organization, a regional Pacific organization called SPC. They already have an app created that uses AI to train the AI to identify the fish, and they put it on the map, and it already gets its size, its scale. So if we gave you something like that was that easy, where you catch your fish, you put it on the mat, you take a picture, it's uploaded. I mean, would you really hate reporting if it was that easy?
Well, no, but you know, you could have somebody that gets, you know, they have smaller fish, right? And they just don't report it, you know, so
it's
still a little bit
the most viable option that we can see right now. And you're gonna have people who don't wanna report, but it's still gonna be more data than we have now.
Thank you.
We have 2, I think she was first, then him. I apologize if I'm wrong.
I just want to clarify this, because we're saying that the preserves are working, but this whole presentation to me is saying that the preserves are not working. And our families in Melissa are sacrificing a lot for these preserves to be intact and to follow them. You know, our grandparents who lived and fished in these preserves, who have the knowledge, they are dying fast. So I would like to know, where these are implemented, what is the plan to open the preserves if the preserves are working? Why do we need these? You know, and I would trade opening the preserves to have these size limits. But all of our relationships to the fish and the land, that is a sacrifice. Come on, my whole life, these have been preserved, and they're the safest and most accessible waters for mollusks. And everybody fishes in mollusks. They all come down to fish in the lagoon. So show us, what is the consideration for opening the preserves if they're working?
I know that right now there are a series of studies being conducted on the success of the preserves, both here and in other islands. And the preserves have been working. They're not working as well as they could be. And we also know that that's because there's been a lot of poaching in the preserves. And that's what's contributing to part of the decline. And so part of this is also to try and curb that, to improve the success of the preserves. I also know that in Hawaii, when they tried rotating the preserves, they saw that it absolutely failed. They opened the preserves, and everybody was excited, and they just get swarmed. And they get swarmed and they get hit hard. And then where they set up the new preserve, it didn't recover as nearly as well as they thought it would if they had rotated them. And that's learning from that experience. But it doesn't mean that that's going to be the only decision maker. We're still trying to learn and understand more and study how to improve all of that, or what would work and what wouldn't work. So I don't think it's a closed conversation. I think it's the one that's still ongoing. And perhaps what we need to do better is bringing that conversation out to the community, because we're studying it, but obviously that information isn't being shared. So I think maybe it's just the conversations we need to bring to the community.
I would like to see more of a study that incorporates the whole village, right?
Yes.
Talking about the full system, land to sea. So what happens when you cut off and deteriorate these relationships of a sea village, right?
With the ocean.
With the ocean, that's all preserves, and then now we're seeing extremely high rates of fires in our village, right? Does that come from those relationships deteriorating, right? We don't have access to the waters, do the burners up in the village say, you know, okay, whatever, the accessible fishing is gone, the lagoon is polluted, doesn't matter, let's burn it all. Like, I would like to see those studies when we say that the preserves are.
That's a great idea for a socioeconomic study. It is. I hear you.
So when you have the registering as a fish by
Here's, wait. Okay, sorry, go ahead. I thought he was going to bring you the microphone.
are you going to have a lottery?
What do you mean?
You're going to prize?
To register?
For reporting your fish? What kind of incentives are there?
Well, registering makes you eligible for different programs or different funding opportunities. The perfect example was COVID. When COVID happened, Guam received 2 different funding opportunities. I think it was close to $1 million each time. And it was only for the fishing community. We had no idea, I mean, other than knowing an individual fisher, we didn't know who was in the fishing community. So we had to open that up and say, come register if you're a fisher and you get money. We knew there were absolutely people who were not fishers in the community that were registering for the program, but what could we do about it? You can't prove that someone's not a fisher if you don't know their history. So registering for the program keeps you as part of an opportunity where if there's disasters, you get disaster recovery. That's also what could happen. I mean, the legislature had the crop loss compensation program. I had questions about that after Mauer, if there was going to be something for fishers, but realistically, we didn't have a legitimate registry for fishers. So that's the first part. The second is it lets us know who's there when we want to do different kinds of studies. We have fishers that we can identify to partner with. NOAA was coming in and paying different fishers to drive them around and do drop camera surveys. They get paid for that. If we don't know who fishers are, we're limited to just the individuals that we know rather than opening it up. So it is kind of like a lottery. Sorry.
Good evening. Thank you very much for coming down this evening. And
thank you.
This evening we can all come to my name is Marvel, so I mean so we may not I got a couple of suggestions just for what we're doing towards the future as far as like regulation. Now I know that not only myself but also some of the people in the village that are fishermen and stuff like that are willing to volunteer to help regulate as like a village boundary of a relief area. They could even the mayors could possibly deputize some people that it selects that live off the coast and can actually see what's going on. That can kind of help regulate certain actions from happening. The other thing is, in the future, is it a nice work for a hatchery for the university? So what I'm curious about is, if we have such a depleted resource for fish right now, how about implementing a hatchery program to give all the fish a boost, and then implement the regulations so that way, okay, we've got a year of all this spawning that we can do ourselves to help kind of give nature a boost. The other thing is, over the past years, I've seen the alien population decline greatly. Those are the grazers, the algae off the coral, that, you know, it's a snowball effect.
Yes.
If there's no grazers there, coral can't grow, fish aren't going to be there. So I think that we're looking in the right areas, but there's also one big thing that we're missing is how are we going to reverse what's happening already?
Okay, so the first one, yes, we've talked about that. Having volunteers or volunteer fishers from the community almost be like a reservist force for the conservation officers. And we love that idea, but the first thing we had to do was build up our number of conservation officers. Because you can be the person from the village, we don't want you taking action against someone, you know, who's violating something, but we want you there to report it, absolutely. But we need enough conservation officers to respond to that. So we have started our conservation apprenticeship program where it's jumped us from 5 conservation officers. There's 12 going through the 14, going through the apprenticeship program right now. So we're gonna be at 19. We always look to the legislature for more funding to hire more conservation officers. We talk about that with the governor. She gave us the ARP money to start the conservation apprenticeship program. So we are trying to do that so that we can also support a community reservist program. We are starting a hatchery, absolutely. The governor created the Division of Aquaculture within our agency now. We hired an awesome guy, Mike Ogo. We stole him from the CNMI. He was the one who implemented the rabbitfish hatchery over in Saipan. He's working for us now, so he's on our side. He has funding to start a nursery hatchery. I think it's about $280,000. So he's working on building it. We're working on getting there. We want to do, and the first purpose of that was ecosystem restoration. It was to grow fish to put them out in the water. The second goal of that was economic diversity, so that someone could turn that into a private business for themselves where they learn how to operate a hatchery. Like you've already been trained. You could turn that into a business and then expand and grow from there. So those absolutely are our intentions. Forgot what, the Ililing, and not just that, but also the Balati. We have been looking at that. We've already had conversations about how to change the regulations on that, because right now they're kind of insane, where you can take like, I think for Balati it's 100 pieces per person per day. So we already have the draft for that we like to introduce to change that regulation, as well as with the Ililing. We have been looking at that. Okay, yes.
So is it true that the preserves have to be looked at every 5 years as well as all these other implementations?
No. So I just asked that question of our team earlier today because Mayor Chargaloff brought it up. He said it was a concern of yours that you've raised with him, sir, so he's wanted to bring that up. From what I understand, because I wasn't there at the time, there were conversations about revisiting the preserves, but that was when they were talking about like 12 different preserves around the island. And so that got left out or thrown out when they reduced the number of sizes of the preserve that they adopted into law.
So can we...
There are no years.
Is there any other avenues? Because it'd be a lot easier to sell these if you would... I mean, the recipe for preserve works great in Tuman, fisheye, it helps tourism, it's easy to enforce. Ones down south from Patty Point all the way to Mauricio, it hurts us because preserves keep honest people out, and we watch flashlights in there at night and it drives us crazy. So can we maybe take and give? We'll gladly give you some of these if you can get rid of these preserves that are obviously not working. And yeah, they do work. I've been in all of them. I've seen them. I've taken a lot of these researchers out. I jump in the water. I take a look, and there's fish at Patty Point swimming around with holes in them. There's always reports of night divers up there. Down in Mauricio, same thing. We watch the boats go around Cocos, and it's just, that one's not working. So can you put some effort into that, and then we'll definitely give you some of these, because I think the size limit's going to be a great thing if you can get it, but give something back. Thank you.
Okay. Duly noted. I can say that we will have that conversation, and I hope that when we do, you come out and participate. Okay. Yes.
Hey, good evening, Felix Reyes. I actually work for the Western Pacific Regional Fishery Management Council. Way back many years ago, I'm addressing the folks from Alexu. We worked with the village mayor, the community, and almost all of the government agencies to develop a Malesso Village Resource Management Plan. That plan was done in 2013. Unfortunately, it never took root. It did not take traction with Mayor Ernest. And we've now been in talks with your Mayor Champaco. And that same idea to create a plan, and it's also being rolled out to the mayor of PDGC Alley and also the mayor here. We had one going with the mayor of Jigo, but he could not identify a coastline where we would like to manage. But the essential, I'm sorry.
No, go.
Very little to do with the, well, there is a lot to do with the FMP because they complement each other. But the plan gives you, folks from your villages, the stewardship to manage your resources. And if you give me your email, I can mail to you the plan that was completed in 2013. That's 12 years ago. It has not taken traction. There's a lot of opportunities to do that as well that can complement the FMP with a community-based resource management plan for Melissa. Thank you.
I think he had it.
I just got a question for maybe conservation officer. The preserved area, we can't step in the water to catch the Inalåhan with the lava. I got a question for conservation officer.
Yes, you can.
Water,
yes.
Can we step in the water with the lava?
Yes.
Yes.
To retrieve your net.
We can't go in the lava in the water.
You mean go in to cast out your net?
Yeah.
Can he's asking?
No, the scoop net.
The scoop net.
Scoop net.
You can? You can. Not in 2 months? Is it accepted in 2 months? I'm sorry, I can't.
Hey, you should know. You should know.
Sure.
It's enforcing.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Joey Tanoy. That's a very good question, sir. As we look into the high and mean watermark, right, and then if you're casting, that's a lodza, but I hear you're asking for a different type of net? Oh, the scoop net. Yes, well, it is still a preserve. There's 2 fishing methods. That is not the preferred method. So that's a no-go.
Okay, so why's the reason?
Practically, it's because of the enforcement procedures and the method that's used to fish. So the prohibitions are drag net, spear gun, buck tackle.
But why not?
He's saying why not?
Why not?
This killing, stepping on the coral, killing other things. Why not?
You know, I would have to look into that and see what type of. Oh, yes, I should know, but the enforcement part of that is. Yes, sir. So if I see them doing that, I will enforce it and they will go to jail because the 2 authorized methods right now is Talals and Robert. Any other means, they will go to jail.
Actually, small change though. It's not. It was decriminalized.
There is all stepping all over the water.
Yes.
Yeah.
That.
Why we cannot go in the water?
You know, to Conservation Officer Chalahi and myself, I don't know why it was like that. I wasn't around when that law was adopted or that regulation. We can absolutely find out, but he's just trying to enforce the law as it is, and that's what he's supposed to do. So he can't explain, and I can't explain why not. I can't explain why it was illegal to sell octopus. I also can't explain why you can take 100 balati per person per day. We don't know why these original regulations were passed. We're just trying to figure out what we can address and how to make it better now. Wait, sorry, there's one question back. Yes, ma'am.
So, sitting here thinking about this, and I know that part of what's hurting the reef corals are laserman's fishing. They use Darius and Clorox. No, I know that Clorox kills the coral and all the other fishes, including the babies. And that's part of what's killing also the fishes and the reef. Darius, I don't know. I don't know if Darius kills corals, but I know that it paralyzes and maybe even kills the baby fishes. You know, I'm growing up, I'm very aware of that because I hear about that. And I did witness that.
That's awful.
It's awful, very awful. So that's one of the things that we need to, the preventer, I don't know if you call them wardens. You know, I know wardens are in the jungle as a hunter for hunters, I don't know the fishing. But yes, we need to really watch that because if you see a fisherman with a full cooler at night of fish, could be that too. Or if you look around and you see that there's a lot of floating little ones or even medium-sized ones, it could be that too, either Darius or Clorox. So that's to prevent the fish and the coral and the reef.
Thank you, that's terrible. Good evening.
Key person is from Medicine. I'm overwhelmed in a good way with the presence, the presentation, and the technology. My question is more along the lines of transparency. How do you reflect the voice, the input that is being given to these suggestions or strategies? I think we have to be careful how we interpret emotional comments that are usually always coming from the negative side instead of being proactive. So the transparency element is how do you take a voice, a comment that was made about a preserve or whatever issue related to the fisheries and reflect that in the process. The stakeholder input is just critical. So without that transparency, when we propose the minimum size action plan, it has to be defined by, based on these comments, here are the coded comments that are relevant to the science behind size limits. But then at the same time, how is that reflective of who said that size limits is going to help restore the fishery or, you know, provide that next step of sustainability? I think that's where the science and the role of government needs to be very transparent in the way we disseminate that as public information. So when size limits, you have to say this is what it includes. This is what it does not include. I think that's the level of real conversation and knowledge sharing that needs to belong to the community. The government side needs to also be transparent because you bring this is a great show, dog and pony show. The data is typical of government work. But when you sit down and say, why is the huzo this size? The emotional, you're telling a fisher who's subsistence fishing that that's his preference size, right? But in terms of looking at your fishing effort, there's a lot of related issues. So when you have a policy, I think that comment needs to say, what was that policy based on? Was it the bias of the enforcement regulatory arm or the real input that was interpreted in a different way? So when you propose those steps, be mindful that how is the comment shared in a town hall meeting interpreted? And bring it back to say and verify, was this what you meant? I think when we do surveys, we often go through the activity of capturing, oh, we did our part of the checklist. But we don't come back and validate, was this the interpretation and was it accurate? So that's the element of being transparent, but also making sure that the representation of that voice is neutral to the process. But firstly, whether it's a Molesto fishery, I consider Guam my home. When we look at how we restrict, we have to change the mindset of what does restriction mean in a positive way. And I think a lot of this effort is coming from a negative reference. We need to look at it from the sustainable future reference and look back on the history when you said as far back as the 1970s. I've had my share of Mr. Martinez, can we survey your catch? And I know the value of that process. Sure, guy comes up, puts the tape. Every time a boat lands on the pier, they have people there, but you know, it's not as frequent as we would like. And when the hardcore fisherman goes out, it's a different set of circumstances. But when we share those anecdotal information about what we're seeing, how do we take that information and translate that into an enforcement policy? That's that gray area that needs to be identified in this process. So that when you come out, that relationship and trust is the right way to have the conversation. But when it comes too much on the government heavy side, I mean, I come from a government background. At the same time, when we offer plans, we have to always maybe premise it with, this is what we're working for before we throw it into a plan. When you say a plan, it always dictates that there's going to be a policy, and the policy is going to put controls, right? So I think we need to always say, if we do this, this is what's going to happen. The gentleman that made the comment about the gigaw, I grew up in the gigaw period. I knew what it was like to set up gigaw. I've seen both the positive side of the gigaw and the negative side of the gigaw. But mostly a lot of it was the people raiding the gigaw that don't own the gigaw. And that, you know, it was back then. It was a lottery. The work and time to do all that. I remember Chudney's business coming down to Molesto, collecting the fish caught by the gigaw fishers and bringing it up to Paganya. My job was putting it in the scale, putting it in his cooler, and bringing it. Those are traditional practices, but you know what? I never saw a fish that was undersized. I never saw a fish that was not the type that was being selected for market. But one thing I know is that I had my selection of quality fish that is a privilege for me to have. Not that I have to go out and do my fishing effort just to come back to have enough for a dinner.
Thank you, Pete. And to that, I absolutely agree with you. And we're not here, we've said from the beginning, this is not the plan. We said this is what has come out of conversations with the fishing community. This is the suggestions. This is how we compared it to different data. And this is what we're coming up with. What do you think? That was the purpose of all of this. Then there are the activities that Leilani has designed that is also there to try for you to validate what we put up here. Does this reflect what you were thinking? Does this reflect what you would like to see? That was the purpose of the activities. I don't know if we still have time for those. If you want to stay for them, we'll absolutely have them with you. So we are trying to do that, to bring our conversation with transparency back to the community for you to validate what we think we heard. And that was an actual conversation that we had. Is this actually what the community said? That's why we're here. Yes.
I got a couple questions, but I want to get an understanding of things you brought up. And maybe some of the numbers will define what is subsistence and how do you guys define subsistence versus commercial?
Okay. The subsistence fisher is someone who's fishing for their family, for their friends, for family events, and their goal is not to sell a majority of their catch. Versus commercial, right now, it's actually kind of funny in that all the different areas that have management plans, that has been their struggle. So I was at a meeting with a bunch of people from Honolulu and they couldn't figure out how to define it. So I said, we're gonna try and see if we can just define a commercial fisher based on if you're registered with the Department of Revenue and Taxation and have a business license.
So in essence, you don't have actual data to determine what is commercial.
That wasn't your question. Your question was how do we define, but what do you mean do we have the actual data? We have vendors that have been reporting who they buy fish from, so that's commercial data.
You're talking more here commercial fishing.
Yes.
So you gotta have a definition of what is considered commercial fishing.
Yes.
Right now, just in our conversation, especially if you don't have that data, because we're looking at two types of, you got the traditional culture, I can tell, versus the commercial fisherman. I'm leading into another question that ties into that.
It's hard to hear you. Can you hold the mic up?
I'm leading to another question that's tied into that, is that you're making, you are proposing mandatory licensing. And there gotta be a reason for that we talked about modified farming. But is that the true reason to make it mandatory versus saying, well, you want a fisherman volunteer to come and register and you use basically the notion that you're gonna miss grants, you're gonna miss opportunities, you only work with certain people, you know certain people. But putting it as a mandatory for everybody, including traditional cultural practitioners, you raise that into ancestral rights itself. But how do you define that and determine that, would we be exempt from use licensing?
Okay, I understood your question up to the last part, but what I can say is right now the data we collect primarily comes from commercial vendors. We do intersect with some fishers who identify themselves as commercial. Some of them do have business licenses. But like we said again, this is not a final policy. But what we would like to do with the final policy is make it mandatory to register for when you're selling fish. And along that lines, if you're a subsistence fisher, and we would like to make it mandatory to register at that, because then we'll actually have a database or a list of who the fishers of Guam are. And we would like to have that data, yes, to know what people or who's out there fishing and what they're catching, because that can contribute to just better management, better decisions, better understanding of who's fishing in our waters. And we can always go back to what everything was like with traditional fishing, but this isn't a traditional present. It looks very different from what it used to be when most of you started fishing. Can you say that you truly have an idea of everybody who's fishing out there and what they're catching and how much? That's information I would like to have. That's information our team would like to have. I would hope that that's information that you would like to have. Who's out there catching and how much are they catching? And has it shifted? Does it shift over time? Does it change? I mean, there's so many more boats out there that's one of the major issues we have to address now as an agency, is how many people are in our waters in boats? Are they all registered? Are they all carrying safety? That's not even our lane, but we still have those questions. So yes, we want mandatory licensing, and the hope is that everyone participates in mandatory reporting, but the intent isn't sinister. It's so that we can understand what's happening in Guam's fisheries. We don't have, yes, we have our krill surveys. Those happen 8 days out of a month, 16 times out of a month, because there's 2 shifts, morning and evening. That's not nearly enough to give us all the data that we need, but it's what we have to work with, and that's what we're trying to do.
So, in that sense, you need more data.
Yes, we need more data.
Part of the thing there that brings into the next question is, and I had to bring up, thank you for putting that screen up there. Your title is these measures are meant to target overfishing. And I'll emphasize overfishing. You stated in the main cause of the reef decline because of overfishing, over exploitations of our fisheries. Now, NOAA and Coral Reef initially initiative have both attributed Guam's fish decline to basically bleaching, sedimentation, and climate changes. Why is the plan targeting fishers instead of prioritizing coastal runoff enforcement of coral recovery? And we did have some coral recovery on our side, but is it really true? I mean, what is the true? Maybe you can explain more.
All of those things are true at the exact same time. There is, I said it earlier, there's land-based sources of pollution, there's erosion, but there's also fishing pressure. The main reason this is targeting fishing is because it's a fisheries management plan. We have a coral reef resilience strategy. We have a forest system plan as well as a forest management plan. We have 2 plans for forestry. So we are approaching and attacking those other issues, but those have their own plans that are specific to them. This one is specific to fisheries.
This is the last question.
Sure.
We have what's called the sports restoration federally funded.
Yes, sports fishing fund.
Now that sports fishing funds can go to exactly what we're trying to do, the data research. I noticed that we have, back then, when I used to participate when the kids were 2 fishing derbies, that we have to use all the money to get the money out because we got to get every single child in the fishing derby. But the data or the money that we have is a lot. I mean, I did a FOIA on that. And what's interesting to note is that that money can be used for a lot of information you're bringing in terms of collecting the data, fixing the ramps, fixing all these runoffs that we can first isolate and say, yeah, I mean, you look coming down from Palm Bay, you're going to see all that runoff. You look at down the deep Palm, you're going to see the runoff. And is it really the sediments or is it really overfishing? Thank you.
Well, when you look at Talafofo Bay and Pago Bay, it is really the runoff, especially after a rain. But yes, we have the Sports Fish Restoration Fund, and we do spend it on sports fish activities. I think part of it goes also to our krill surveys. So part of it goes to our krill surveys. Part of it goes to support our fishing education and outreach program that now has expanded to sometimes 3, sometimes 4 derbies a year. Those are all free to the community, as well as the clinic before that. We also do spend money on ramp maintenance. That's what they do with the water blasting down at the different piers. We're also trying to, we have funding to replace Maritzo Pier that we're working on an MOA with the Port Authority. So that money is already set aside specifically to replace that pier. We spend the money where it's supposed to go. I can't hear you.
Agate.
Yes.
That pier is down for how long that we have not been able to use?
Yes.
What's your priority in terms of, I mean, you have the money is there.
Well, it's a limited amount of money. I mean, we can't fund all of them at one time, but we're rotating it as much as possible. We just committed to the port to spend money to try to replace Dock A at Boat Basin. We've already replaced piers at Agate Marina for the port, because that's actually the port's jurisdiction. We've spent over $500,000 on the port in Agate. Okay. Yes, sir.
I've got an enforcement question.
Sure. I hope I have an answer.
I want to find out where the guy that goes out, goes fishing, pays $5 a gallon for his gas, and what happens if that guy sells some of his fish just to fund his trip and keeps the rest? Is that a subsistence fisherman or a commercial fisherman?
That's a whole special category. I learned about this category from our fishers. That's called an artisanal fisher. So you wouldn't fall under commercial. An artisanal fisher is someone who catches fish, sells some of that fish to recoup their costs, and then takes the rest of the fish home. So there's 3 different categories actually. We're still trying to figure out what the threshold would be for an artisanal fisher before you become a commercial fisher. And the primary reason of that is because we don't want commercial fishers to find a loophole and call themselves artisanal so that they don't have to report. But yes, you're an artisanal fisher. We're not trying to put any sort of restrictions on that. We understand that that's how people make back their money. I want to be one of the people who gets to buy fish from artisanal fishers because I don't fish. I'm a commercial fishery eater. Commercial eater. If you have enough fish. Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment. University of Guam Marine Lab, and I did a study a couple of years ago looking at all 26 or 28 of the rivers and also with the fish assemblages. And we were looking at which one's having a bigger impact, to your point, exactly what we were studying, the water quality. And the answer is exactly what she said. Both were having a very significant impact. But it was a 2-to-1 ratio. The fishing pressure measured by the distance to the nearest access point, a boat ramp, had double the impact of the water quality data that we were collecting. So both had a negative impact, but the fishing pressure had about a 2-to-1 ratio.
I just burped into my microphone.
Really interesting. In the land-based pollution, you get this zone of death. After the big rains,
oh shit!
These huge see, you see these big brown mud plumes, and what happens after that big zone right there is that there's actually all that nutrient coming out of Propel's plant paper, which is like food for the fish. Anyway.
Here. Use this one. That one seems to last better.
Okay, all I was getting at there was there's this zone of death, which is getting bigger and bigger as more and more land erodes, and that's a horrible thing, and everyone understands it. But after that zone of death, there's this zone of benefit, and it's ironic that you can think about it, but actually all of that nutrient from land goes somewhere, and nutrient is food for something. But it is producing more fish, but it's producing only a certain kind of fish. Wheelie, pelaxi, things like that are the ones you see in those areas. So you're lowering the diversity and you're increasing the biomass in that area compared to other areas. So it's kind of like a complicated thing that's going on, I think. Then the second thing I wanted to say, because first of all, Team DAWR has done just an amazing job with this. You guys, I've watched a lot of these things on many different islands, and I just want to applaud what you guys have done, so I think that's awesome. But now as you guys go and make your comments and decide on different practices, I just wanted to say a few things that I think. So there's talk about 4 major categories of regulations. Size classes. People seem to be for size classes, it makes sense. And what size classes do is allow people to fish down to a certain point. So what does that mean? That's like bush cutting your lawn and then taking a smaller bush cutter to bush cut your lawn. It's going to take you much longer. So when you put the fish down to a certain size, the fish are going to be fished down to a size limit, it's going to take the reef longer to recover. And why is that a problem? Because climate change is increasing the amount of disturbances that impact the reefs. So size classes are really good, but they're not going to solve everything. So what about commercial ban on those big fish? That's great. Commercial ban is also really useful and it's helpful. But the most recent study showed a minimum of 4 pounds being harvested for subsistence compared to 1 pound for commercial. There's just more subsistence fishing. That's just like what's going on in all the islands. So again, it's not like going to solve everything, but these things go in tandem with each other. Marine protected areas, why are they useful? Of course, there's this thing, when they're well enforced and you have all those fish in there, you have this amazing ecological function. Now your reef recovers faster, you bush cut your yard faster. It all goes down much faster and you recover faster. So now when climate change comes, you're more prepared to offer recovery to surrounding reefs. So that's really what I wanted to say, is just that all of these things operate with each other. And so when they were thinking about them, I don't think they thought any one was going to solve everything. If there is any one of the measure that's up there that is more powerful, you all know it. It's the nighttime ban on spearfishing. And the only time I've ever seen that is on the island of Pulap in outer islands of Micronesia. We're surveying some of the atolls and we got over to this atoll and I couldn't believe the amount of fish on the reef. They were allowed to hook and line, they were allowed to day fish, but there was just no night fishing allowed. It was a small atoll too and there was no export or anything. But if that helps put anything into perspective. But I wanted to just put a perspective on the land-based pollution and then where each regulation can have a benefit, but it has a limitation as well.
Okay, I just want to do a time check. It's 8 o'clock. Lonnie still has those 2 activities for you if you want to stay for that. I think maybe this could be the last question, and we can let Leilani do her activity.
Real quick, if we do a nighttime back, how far are we talking about from the reef out? How are you guys going to monitor how far out? Because currently right now you can go as far as you want and come back in with a whole cooler. And then how do you determine that it was? But right now you can see a lot of these actually going on in different areas with different sized boats. But how do you determine, or the minute they come in, you guys have the manpowers to regulate these things?
That's our hope right now, because we have the Conservation Officer Apprenticeship Program. So by the time, well, they're law enforcement right now. So right now we're rolling with about, I want to say like 18 officers deep. That's way more than we've had in the last 8 years, more than that. When I started in 2019, we had 4 officers.
For me,
and also, we're legally allowed to patrol up to 3 miles.
Okay. Now, your preserves, is there a reason why the fishing derbies are not held in the preserves to collect your data?
We have had fishing derbies.
Well, the last, I can tell you how many years it didn't.
No, didn't we just have one in the preserves? We just had one at EPOW like last year. I'm sorry? 2023.
That's far away. Is it working? What data have you guys collected?
Well, I don't have that on me right now, but I mean, the kids are limited in what they can catch because they're hook and lining from the shore. Oh, here, Brent has it.
We've done kids reserves or kids derbies, as you know, for many years, and the derbies in the preserves are not good because where the kids can cast out and catch, that's not where the fish are in the preserves. The fishing derbies that we have next to the preserves, the catches and catch rates are much, much higher because you're getting fish spilling out of the preserve to the areas where the kids catch them. You asked, I remember we generated CPUE data and catch data for the kids' derbies. We still collect that every year, still generate that every year. And we found the derbies that are in the preserves, the catches are terrible because there's not fish in the preserves where the kids are fishing. In the derbies next to the preserves, the catch rates are very, very high. And because we're seeing spillover from the preserve areas.
Okay. Okay, my name is John Delgado. I'm the one that's a fisherman from Guam, all around. But you guys said that the fish, well, let me start it. You know, last month we did good in Manila. Well, this month we didn't even get nothing. There's so many earthquakes that's happening, okay? And Manila was supposed to run. Because I went to Washington, I came back, and here I am. I said, what's happening? So, just like the chicken, when they lay eggs, earthquake, it turns into cuero, right? So, same thing with fish. The fish, they go out and lay eggs, you know that, okay? And you shake it, it turns into cuero, right? Okay? And we are following each other, right? Okay. So we cannot really blame, we're the fishermen here. We're all helping you guys. And in the same token, you must help us. And to assure us, we need some protection from you. Because there's so many times that they pass a law that we didn't even know that it's already been passed. Until 3 weeks later, they go, hey, do you know what's going on? I don't even know. The same thing with the fishermen that's going on, that are not here. Those fishermen that's out there sacrificing themselves, whether it's a Panopane, Palau, Chukis, whatever. Those are all human beings. But in the same token too, if you can bring them in with a translator and sit down with us, we'll be okay. And assure the protection of them too. Okay? That's what we're missing here. This is all we have. Okay? The next one. Just like the preserve. Nobody knows how good the preserve. You guys are the ones telling us. Can you... Here in Inalåhan, there's a quota. when they go fishing, they put a name in the mayor. If the mayor's here, he knows what I'm talking about. I'm from Inalåhan too. Okay? So, same token, get quota, get some kind of, see what you can do for the people. You know, grab 10 people from each village and say, your name has been submitted. Allow them to fish and then get some, statistic from it. Because that will alleviate some of the people here in Guam of the Christian here. They're all fishermen. We all have respect. But when I lose my respect, you know already. I'm not a small-time fisherman. I raise cows, I raise pigs, I do everything. I'm living off the fatherland. And here we are. We're right back to square one. I'm avoiding to make sure that nothing goes wrong. Now, if you can assure the people here that before you finalize this, allow us to read it and finalize it, and not when you submit it in, we approve of it, but when it goes into you, you're going to delete us and add to your thing. That's what's happening in the past, and we've been doing that. I'm one of the board when we did the indigenous fishing rights when Governor Eric Cabo was on duty. I wasted my time trying to clarify because the legislature said, the Attorney General said that the wording was so good that they didn't believe that we wrote this fishing rights so precise that the legislature don't want to sign it because nobody want to take responsibility of it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So you gotta assure us, because we're not gonna read 3 weeks later and it's already in the law. You gotta support us on this. Yesterday I was upset because they did us wrong. And when you guys went out there and you got your people out there surveying how much of these people caught, we agreed to you guys. We agreed. We never push you guys out. When I catch and the people that comes to survey, I